Wonderful. All right. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thanks for finding this important. Thanks for joining. We are going to be on a fast track together tonight because I've got a lot of research to bring to you and present to you. And I want to make sure we cover all of it and get a chance to kind of open up for questions and discussions towards the end. So feel free to use the chat. When I run trainings like this, I often have, and I do have my chat open so I can kind of see some comments coming in. If there are any questions that I can answer right there on the spot, that's a clarification, I'll try to keep tabs on that. But like Brian said, I typically like these to last till the end because of the journey we'll be on. You'll see how I'm going to kind of weave a lot of this together. So we're talking about social media and this intersection that happens with social media, mental health, and substance use among young people, and how that can be a really risky place for our young people. Brian already kind of told you this, and I'll make sure I have my email at the end, but just in case you want any research or any of the documents or resources that I'll have for you, I can always email those to you. So that's my contact information. Just a little smidge about me that will help kick us off. I'm actually coming to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania today. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, but also lived in south central Louisiana and then southwest Missouri. And Missouri was actually my longest stint of 12 years, which is where I did a great deal of my prevention work. And then as I started my business, my company consulting several years ago, I started to expand, kind of reach, and I decided I want to move back towards Pennsylvania to be close to these five adorable nephews that I have for exact topics like we're talking about today. I want to be a protective factor for the young people that I've got in my life, in my personal life, and super, super duper important to be there. And connected to that is this next image, which is me in a room full of 300 young people in New Jersey. And I'm somewhere in that audience. I'm rather short, so it's kind of like a Where's Waldo. But this picture to me just encapsulates what I do and why I do it. I don't always get to speak to rooms full of youth, but I love the moments that I do. However, what I'll say is I believe that every single youth that is over there in your community has a powerful voice and has the right to be empowered to use that voice for good. And so I was actually talking with these young people about this very topic. So I'm giving you kind of the adult presentation tonight, but I talked to them about this as well and help them come up with solutions for them and their peers and ways that they can advocate to be safer in this online space. And so this picture to me just means a lot because this was a room full of young people who cared about this topic. So tonight, I'm going to talk about the facts of every single piece of these like three things we're talking about, the three topics, and then talk about where we see them intersecting. I've got a lot of research to give you. All my slides are sourced so that you know that this is coming from research, not just kind of pulling it out of the air. And then we'll finish with how we'll make an impact. How you, as a parent, as a trusted adult, as a school member, staff, as someone who works in the community, how we can make an impact in this space. Now, I start all of my social media based presentations with this next comment, and that is that social media is not all bad. In fact, research shows us that there's a couple things specifically that make social media an asset to our world. First of all, it connects us. We are far more connected than we've ever been in the history of mankind, other than arguably maybe when there were two people walking around. Jokes aside, we're way connected. I actually, just a year ago this week, was over in Tanzania, Africa, and I summited Mount Kilimanjaro in the African plains. And I came down from that mountain, and the next time we were connected to Wi-Fi at a camp, I was able to get on Instagram and send my family a message that said, I'm alive, I did it, I was successful, and let them know I was okay. That is incredible to think that I was over in literally the plains of Africa, not even a town, plains and connected to some Wi-Fi, and I was able to communicate with my family halfway across the world. So it connects us. You likely have loved ones that you're connecting with on a regular basis in the online space. It makes us laugh. I dropped a meme here because who doesn't love a good meme? You got to see these things. We've all, I share reels back and forth with my friends and family, makes us laugh, introduces us to new ideas, new perspectives. Whether we want them or we don't, we still get introduced to them because we see that the world is bigger than what we've always known when we were limited by no internet, when we didn't have all that. It also provides support. Now, that could be something
No
you can
exclamation
look. Oh,
points.
oh, I think
Don't tell
somebody might
me
need to
you
mute.
had to stay after for detention.
Hey, sorry. Could you make sure that you're muted? Thank you. Um, I think it's the account. Let's see. It's the Andrew McDonald. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So provide support. And this could look like something that you have an interest or a hobby in. I am a victim to the pandemic and I continue to be the sourdough girl. And so I can get online and I can look up, things recipes and people who post about their sourdough and find out tips and tricks. But it also provides support for people experiencing some challenges, whether that is things like mental health challenges or the algorithm tracking keywords and phrases that are implying harm to self or to others. And as you'll see on this last point on this slide, recent research actually shows that social media can be really important for young people who are in that stage where they're marginalized or they are, maybe in distress times. And so can be really important for that. And then that creative expression platform. So social media is not all bad. We gotta, I think, in my personal opinion, we as adults need to have this as our mentality. Before we get into everything we're going to talk about, I think that we really, really, really need to understand this because otherwise we are going to approach social media with young people in our lives from a place of disdain or from a place of, oh, I didn't have this when I was a kid. Our youth was so much better because we didn't have social media. No, our youth was just different. Like our youth, I didn't grow up with social media. I was one of the OG Facebook members while I was at Penn State. It's not always been around for me either. But the point being, we can't approach young people and expect to have healthy conversations when we're coming at it from unchecked bias of social media is bad or terrible. Because the truth is, we're all likely on it. Many of us as adults are already on them, probably spending several hours a day on it. And so we've got to approach it from this perspective in order to be able to have good, healthy conversations about safety and about wellness. So, given that, while I'm saying it's not all bad, the rest of my time with you is going to be talking about some of the consequences because we do need to be aware of this. First of all, let's just talk about some physical stuff. Research is showing that it's causing just devices in general, causing strain to the eyes and to the body. And that is in part because I mean, until really, let's just say 2008, when the first iPhone came out, if we make that kind of our marker in time, we as humans, until the last, several years, we have not had a phone glowing in our face, 6 inches from our face. Most of mankind, we did not have that happening. So our eyes are having to adjust to this new glowing screen. Our bodies are strained because I don't know anybody who texts and scrolls the internet, in a perfect chiropractor approved posture. Typically you're slouched, you're looking down, the neck is craned. I mean, there's just a lot of strain we're putting on our bodies. And connected to that, sleep deprivation. If you all were on camera, I would make you raise your hands and say, how many of scrolling the internet? And that's just truth. Like most of us have probably been there. Or we wake up in the middle of the night and, we kind of want to check the time and our phones are now our clocks. And so we click that and we say, oh, well, I also have notifications. Let me just check those. And suddenly we're wide awake and scrolling in the middle of the night. So definitely affecting sleep deprivation, seeing an increased risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, as they are starting to study the brain and the impact of screen use, they're seeing a shrinking in the cognitive processes in the brain, which affects learning, affects concentration, affects impulse control, and it's affecting language. Now, that's not really taking into account like brain rot. So the new language that Gen Alpha has come up with, which by the way, I also do research on all of the generations. And let me tell y'all, I get excited when I talk about Gen Alpha, those that are like 13 and under. I mean, the fact that they have developed their own language is actually pretty impressive and incredible. But connected to that, I would just say that this is just language learning delays in general because many of them are they're learning about like short-term lingo. They're not writing full sentences, so some delays there. Now, interestingly enough, and the irony is not lost on me that this next slide I'm going to show you is actually I got it from Facebook. This is what happened when teacher put in front of her room a flip chart paper. And for one class period, she told her students, 30-ish students in the classroom, said, okay, I want you to turn on your notifications. And anytime we hear a sound, I want you to come up and mark, put a tally mark where that came from, that notification came from, just to get an idea of how many notifications are coming into a device during a 50-minute class period. And this, my friends, is what that looked like. So you take that in for a second. Top left, we've got Facebook. To the right of that is Snapchat. To the right of that is emails. There's a huge section of text messages. In the middle, dead center is phone calls. And I say this a little tongue in cheek, like who was calling them during school? And the answer is probably you, the parent, the guardian, calling them. Instagram over here on the right middle, and then down the bottom left is Twitter or X. In the center bottom is GroupMe or Discord, and then other in the bottom right, that is likely apps like that are gaming apps, things like that. So we look at this and we're like, oh my gosh, like such distraction happening from phones. And I know that school districts across the US have been implementing in the past year cell phone policies that either remove them from the classrooms or have them be stored separately. And so a lot of this is there. Now, one of the things I'll mention several times tonight is us as adults and our behaviors as well. I would challenge you next time you're at work or you're doing your daily tasks, do this for an hour and see what kind of notifications came into your phone. It won't look like this because there's not 30 of you, but it would just to see how many push notifications comes to your device in the matter of an hour. And here's the point of this. Those behind the apps and the generation of the apps and the push notifications, like they understand the human brain. They get it. They understand that the human brain is wired to build addiction and reliance on the release of dopamine and the good feeling chemicals. So this slide has this visual from the National Institute on Drug Abuse that was sort of trying to show the dopamine release, where on the left, the orange bubbles represent dopamine, and those are the dopamine receptors in the brain when eating food. The left picture is when eating food. So y'all either had dinner or you're about to have dinner. Maybe you're eating it right now. Your brain is going, ooh, this is good for me. We should do this eating thing again. Like, this is good. We like this. So it's releasing dopamine to reward you for eating so that you do continue to nourish yourself again in the future. On the right is NIDA's demonstration of what happens when cocaine is introduced to the brain. So dopamine is this very natural thing that happens, but when drugs are introduced, it floods the brain, creates that high that people then crave and continue to use because of that high. So anything that we do that's good for us, whether that's like listen to music, spend time with friends, eat, intimacy, all of those things create that dopamine release for us. But the research that's gone into our devices is that they also release this dopamine. When we have notifications coming in, we get this rush of dopamine. Oh, someone wants to talk to me, or there's something coming in, there's something I should pay attention to. And it creates this feedback loop where we desire and crave that. And again, I challenge you to question your own behavior. Has there ever been a time where you were sitting there and you thought, I haven't really had notifications lately, and maybe even subconsciously, you're not aware of it, but you tap your phone just almost like subconsciously to see if there's a notification. And if you have and you didn't have a notification there, you might be more prone to open your phone, unlock it, and go to a social media account of some kind. And you're almost scrolling then till you get satisfied with that dopamine hit. So there's this process that even we as adults go through that creates this addictive cycle. Well, we understand that the adolescent brain is far more susceptible to addiction before the age of 25. And so the brain, as it's wiring and pruning itself in adolescence and figuring out which neural pathways to strengthen and which ones to get rid of, our brains become more reliant on something like social media and apps that are drawing me in. I mean, even as an adult, I've been doing Duolingo for like 2+ years at this point, and every day it sends me 2 or 3 push notifications. Even after I've done my lesson that day, it's sending me push notifications of, oh, you dropped out of this league, or someone's going to take your spot in the rankings. And like, I don't care about my rankings on Duolingo, but like they're trying to engage with me to get me to open the app again. So even as an adult, that's happening. Imagine being a young person driven to gaming, driven to these conversations that are happening in social media. So all of that helps us to understand that there's actually a biological, physiological addiction that's happening. And it's a socially acceptable one because we're all sort of in this space where we've got these digital devices that we carry around that generate this feedback loop. So getting into sort of these three topics, we're going to look at them individually, like I mentioned earlier, and then figure out our overlap here and the ways that we start to see that blending. I'll just start with some basic facts about mental health and substance use. And I actually have data specifically from your school districts, from your middle school and high school. So thanks to the team for sending that to me because I think it does help to see some local information. So 26% of your middle school students and 28% of your high school students reported that they felt depressed. This is on your YRBS survey from 2023. And then considered suicide, 16% of Lodi Middle and 15% of Lodi High reported that they seriously considered suicide. So these numbers are high. They're about on track with national data. National data actually most recently shows about 1 in 5 or 20% of high schoolers report seriously considering suicide in the past year. So in that sense, your numbers are a little bit better than national, but still, this is not a number that I'm comfortable with at all. This is definitely highlighting a major issue with mental health things, and this is just a small touch on data that we could use and look at. We know that suicide is the second leading cause of death for those 10 to 34, and that there is just this systemic and societal issue with depression and anxiety and other behavioral health disorders that are creating a lot of issues in our community. So just a touch on how serious the mental health challenges are and the fact that we've got some problems happening locally in your community, in your school district. Connected to that, substance use wise, on a national level, marijuana, alcohol, and nicotine, whether through vapes or cigarettes or chew like Zyn, those are the top substances used by youth. So specifically, I've got numbers here of your middle and high schools. I'll let you look at those specifically, but the thing that stands out to me the most is that 17% of your high schoolers have used marijuana in the past month. Your middle school rates are pretty low in terms of tobacco products. But again, 15% of your high schoolers are currently vaping. About 11% misused over the counter or prescription medication, which is a higher number for that substance specifically, and in terms of nationally. And then 32%, almost 1 in 3 of your high schoolers reported alcohol in the past month, alcohol use in the past month. So again, we've got some issues here for sure, and I know that you guys have this community action team that's working on these issues, and I love that. I love that you've got that as a resource. That's huge. But again, the data just shows that that problem needs to continue to be addressed, and which is why I'm thankful people like you are showing up to presentations like this because of the solutions we'll talk about at the end that will help. So, those two topics aside, I kind of kept that short because I think that there's a lot of information out there about substance use and mental health happening in communities. But the information and data that you're probably not as familiar with is substance use. So, I'm sorry, so social media. I said that as I was looking at the term substance use. Social media. So, about half the world's population has a social media account. What I really want to draw your attention to on this slide is what I put in the blue color. 95% of teenagers in the United States and 40% of people 8 to 12 years old have a social media account. Here's here's the thing. Right now, the legal age to have a social media account is 13. So then my question becomes, why do almost half of our 8 to 12-year-olds have a social media account? And what I'm going to explain to you with this intersection is that it's very risky for any young person to be in this space, but especially those who are 8 to 12. So if you are a parent of a young person in that age range and they have social media, I would really, really, really encourage you to double check the privacy settings, double check a lot of things there. While I didn't have time to unpack this topic with you tonight, sometimes I add in the idea of online exploitation that happens with young people, or sextortion, as we're starting to call it, that happens online. And there's just a lot of dangers in this space, especially for those in that 8 to 12 range, because of their vulnerabilities as children, but also for those teenagers. So again, something just to be mindful of, that we've got a lot of our young people in social media accounts. These statistics came from my friends over in Long Island, New York. They did an assessment that talked about time that they spent outside of school. Social networking was third. So I love to see doing homework and studying as number one. Love to see it. And then time with parents and family, 87%. So that's great. But right after that is that social networking. And again, it doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, socializing online, meeting people online is a very common thing these days. We've just got to be safe about it. So speaking of that, I told you as adults, I was going to kind of put us a little bit on blast here tonight. As adults, we will apparently spend about 44 years of our lives staring at screens. I'll let that sink in for a second. So they took the time that we're looking at screens through our computers and our TVs and our phones, and they said basically the average adult is going to spend 44 years of their life looking at screens. Specifically, about 4 to 6 hours on smartphones and about 2 to 2.5 on social media. And actually, on the next slide, I'll show you, I've got kind of the directions on how you can find your daily use, because it is interesting. One of the things we do in prevention work is we raise awareness about things. And so if we can raise awareness about some of the statistics out there and the time that we're spending online, we can at least make an educated decision about our time. I mean, every once in a while, I'll get a notification that says, like, hey, like you've been on here for like 3 hours today. I'm like, man, like I didn't even realize that had happened. So I need to back that down. But when it comes to our teens, our young people, they're spending about 9 hours a day on screens. About 3 to 3.5 of those is watching videos like TikTok, like YouTube. 1 hour to 45 minutes ish on games, and then 3.5 hours on social media. And I put an asterisk there because I really want you to remember that 3.5 hours on social media, that average there, because we're going to come back to that in just a little bit. But cool fact that your student survey actually does ask your young people about their time online. Not all states' student surveys. I've done this presentation all across the United States, and not all schools are asking these questions. So it was great that you all did. 77% of your high schoolers and 64% of your middle schoolers spend over 3 hours a day in front of a TV, a smartphone, an Xbox, or some other kind of digital device. And 52% of your high schoolers, 35% of your middle schoolers use technology between midnight and 5 a.m. on school nights. Again, I will let that sink in, because going back to the sleep deprivation that I talked about, and I'll mention a study that was done in Britain on sleep deprivation, that is directly connected to poor academic performance, poor ability to remember your memory, and a host of other mental health challenges that emerge there. So sleep is so important, but you'll have half of your high schoolers who are online during the midnight to 5 a.m. hours. So again, something really interesting to pay attention to there. This is the little method you can follow to find your time online, just so again, you're more aware. And I know that they're recording this, so you can always come back to this, but go into your settings and explore that. I would encourage you just to become more aware of your own time. And then of course, if you do have young people who are, you have access to their phones, it could be a really helpful thing to explore that together and to look at where's your time going? Which apps are you spending the most time on? Is that how much time you want to be giving to that app? So anyways, we'll get to solutions in a little bit. We're just starting with facts here. These are the apps that youth are on the most. So by the number of users nationally, YouTube's number one, TikTok's number two, Spotify is number three. Now, this survey just asked which apps are you on the most, not social media. So Spotify could arguably be replaced with Snapchat if we were just talking social media. But while I'm not talking about the online exploitation piece tonight, I would encourage you all, if you are a parent or a guardian, check that Spotify, because in the last couple months, they added a chat feature to Spotify. So if you did not know that, that is another app that you should be checking for conversations happening for safety for your young person. All right. And then in terms of number of minutes used daily by young people, TikTok and YouTube, number one and number two. Remember, about 3 to 3.5 hours a day watching videos. There that is. And then Roblox, which is a gaming app, but also has a social chat component to it. So again, a little danger there as well. So we covered some just brief facts about social media, substance use, and mental health. We're going to transition to looking at this overlap where I've got this circle showing kind of like we've got this overlap happening where we've got a dangerous, very risky intersection, and we want to be mindful of what's going on there. What I'm going to do in this part of the presentation is you'll notice in the top right, I've kind of got these bubbles so that you can see which ones we're talking about and kind of follow along because we'll go one by the overlap of each of them. We'll start with substance use and mental health. This looks like two different ways. One, a lot of young people report using substances to cope with mental health challenges, whether that's a diagnosis or not, if they're feeling anxious, if they're feeling depressed, if they need to cope with some sort of emotion, they may be relying on substances to do so. The other way that that looks is that we are starting to understand, especially as more studies are coming out, substance use can actually lead to the onset of mental health challenges, as it says here, like depression, anxiety, aggression, hallucinations. And so research is showing this over and over again that that actually changes the brain's structure. As I said earlier, the brain is still figuring out which neural pathways to strengthen, which ones to prune out. So as they're introducing substances in this developmental stage, it's actually changing the way the brain is structured, and that can look really dangerous. So what I did here, I've got a couple stats to show you of this intersection. This is Missouri student data. I looked at the students who reported seriously considering suicide in the past year and found that those students were far more likely to misuse substances in the past month than their peers that did not seriously consider suicide. So this supports the notion that many are feeling suicidal and potentially using substances to cope. So these numbers show us that of those who were seriously considering suicide, they were 3.2 times more likely to use alcohol. They were 3.4 times more likely to use marijuana and 12 times more likely to misuse prescription medications. So pretty strong pointer there. And then that data also shows that about 1 in 5 Missouri 10th graders reported misusing prescription drugs to help them feel like better or happier. So we see a lot of information coming from this that we can use. Pennsylvania, my current home state, looked at their survey and they kind of had some similar data I could pull, but instead it's about students who reported high depressive symptoms, and they were 3.8 times more likely to use alcohol, 8 times more likely to use marijuana, and almost 12 times more likely to use cigarettes than their peers who were not feeling high depressive symptoms. And our final piece of data that we'll look at here comes from the US as a whole, that teenagers who experienced a major depressive episode in the past year were also more likely to binge drink alcohol, to use marijuana, to vape or nicotine or smoke tobacco, and to misuse opioids. And you can see those percentages there. So there arguably is a very strong connection here between mental health challenges, whether that be depressive symptoms or suicidal thoughts and ideation, with substance use. So that intersection alone is very, very dangerous. Then we shift to social media and substance use. And this data is really interesting to me. Columbia University did a study where they found that just having a social media account as a teenager made them 5 times more likely to buy cigarettes, 3 times more likely to drink, and twice as likely to use marijuana. This wasn't they didn't look at like, oh, who's on there searching for how to roll up a joint or how to mix a cocktail or, how to get cigarettes. They were just having a social media account, which leads to the next stat here on the slide, that it's likely because of just exposure that they see when they are online, that they're seeing videos and pictures of young people who are smoking, who are drinking, and that encourages them to feel like they should do the same or could do the same. So that exposure makes them more likely to use. The other thing that we know about social media is that many youth are using it as their source of drugs. So I would venture to guess that Lodi has a Snapchat account that is the Snapchat account where you can get weed, you could get pills, and probably some of your youth would know what that Snapchat account is because that's oftentimes what's happening. In fact, Snapchat is actually currently in a lawsuit by a class action. I believe it's a class action. There's a lot of families that are involved who have lost their young people to overdoses because Snapchat dealers were selling pills that were laced with fentanyl, and Snapchat was not monitoring any of those chats to sort of stop that sale from happening or that being identified. So this is a very major issue going on. And of course, we understand from what we've heard of nationally how dangerous buying pills online can be because of the fact that they could be laced with fentanyl, which can be very, very deadly. And then my final point here on the intersection between drug use and social media is that in prevention science, and the work that I do primarily to prevent substance misuse by young people, one of the approaches we take is to try to limit the number of advertisements that young people see, to limit how ads maybe make substances feel appealing. And if you're, someone who's been around for a little while, you may remember back in the day there was like Joe Camel that was promoting cigarettes. And that actually that got banned. They're not allowed to use him because it was appealing. Like he looked cool. He wore the bandana, he had this like very like swagger thing to him. And they're like, you're making this too youth friendly. Well, then also recently we had a vape company that also got in big trouble for making their advertisements very youthful, very colorful and poppy, and young people are using the vape on their ads. And so they also got accused of targeting younger people. So we make that part of our prevention priority is to address the promotion of substances and what that looks like. However, in the online space, that's way harder to regulate. It's not that it's impossible, and I don't want to bash the companies too hard. There are absolutely filters in place to stop ads. I've even tried to run some prevention ads on social media and it flags it as, oh, you said fentanyl, we can't run this ad, or you said this substance. So there are some filters there, but it doesn't mean that stuff's not getting through. So I would just say that that is creating an issue as well that youth are seeing more than they should in terms of advertisements and use that is pro consumption, and that's creating that desire for it or feeling like that's normalized. Okay, so we've talked about two of those intersections. Let's talk about our third one, which is mental health and social media. Research points over and over and over and over again that there's a direct connection between social media and increased anxiety, depression, and loneliness. Over and over and over again. One of the things that I will share with you as a resource is the previous administration's Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. He actually released a really great study on youth social media and mental health. And again, it's a resource I'll share with you. It's about 30 pages long, and I highly recommend looking that up when I share it as that resource because he's one of the ones that really defends this notion. We've also got this culture of comparison. We're seeing other people's lives online in the best light that we present ourselves. And so that creates this dissonance between this is what my life looks like and other people's lives look perfect. And even if I've been told, well, everybody puts their best face forward online. I mean, that doesn't necessarily make me feel better. That still makes me feel like, yeah, but mine still doesn't feel good. Or we've got FOMO, the fear of missing out. Maybe you're online, maybe you see friends who are at a party that either you weren't invited to or you weren't allowed to go to. So that FOMO can create a lot of mental health stress as well. And this is the British study I mentioned a little bit ago, talking about decreased, disrupted, or delayed sleep, which leads to increased depression, memory loss, poor academic performance. And so going back to half of your high schoolers are online between midnight and 5 a.m., likely not getting the sleep that they need for their brains to process. Sleep is such an important piece for us, all as humans in general, but especially our young people, because that's when the brain is pruning out the neural pathways that we don't need, keeping the information that we do. Super duper important that we've got this. We also know, connected to mental health, that there's a lot of cyberbullying happening. And if I can just step on toes for a moment, I would just say that we as adults need to do better. We are not modeling well for young people. We are generally as society pretty vicious people to one another online, and so we've got to do better ourselves, but that young people are also bullying one another, creating a lot of havoc with comments that just cut through someone's self-esteem and how they feel about themselves. So we've got to be better about monitoring that. And I mentioned earlier that stat of on average, our young people are on social media 3.5 hours a day. I'm recalling that now because Dr. Vivek Murthy, this previous U.S. Surgeon General, he said he found in his research that those youth who spend 3+ hours a day on social media face twice as likely poor mental health outcomes. So, my friends, if the majority of our youth are spending 3.5 hours online, and if you're over 3 hours, you're twice as likely. That means that the majority of our young people are twice as likely to be experiencing poor mental health outcomes. They're also more likely to be exposed to hate and violence kind of content. As it says here from your survey, 18% of your high schoolers, 21% of your middle schoolers experienced online bullying in the past year. So they're reporting that, about 1 in 5 for both. And then the algorithm. I could spend 30 minutes just talking about the algorithm, but what you need to know as a concerned adult is that the algorithm forces content to us, really, whether we want it or not. You may have had this experience happen to you where, and I'll share a story that happened in my personal life. A friend of mine sent me, this is last year sometime, a Instagram reel of an AI baby dressed like Elvis, and he was singing an Elvis song. You may have succumbed to the AI babies that they're either acting out a movie scene or singing some sort of famous song. They're cute, right? So I watched the whole video. I didn't heart the reel. I didn't follow the account. But what happened next time I opened my Instagram page? It's filled with a lot of different AI generated babies singing songs or doing movie things. And every time I watch another one, it gives me more of that because the algorithm decided that because I paused and watched that video in its entirety, that that's content that I want. So anytime you are scrolling and you pause and you read something or you watch something, the algorithm is tracking that. It is tracking what kind of content you're pausing on, what kind of content you're engaging with. Even if you're not commenting or hearting it or sharing it, it is tracking what you're doing. It's even tracking where your eyes are looking. So if that's not terrifying enough, it's then sending you more content like that that it thinks you want, even if you're not following those accounts. So this is never fun for me because sometimes I'm seeing stuff that I'm like, I don't want to see that. But for our young people, who again, brain's still developing, they may not have the knowledge, the skill set to reset their algorithm to things that they want to be seeing. So they may start seeing more, again, violent, hate-based, or even just inappropriate content because the algorithm is sending that their way. So all of that to say that can really have an impact on mental health because it could create, again, that culture of comparison, the FOMO. It could create feeling badly about themselves, their body image, all kinds of things that can generate from that. This is Dr. Vivek Murthy, who I mentioned did that research. He actually said in an op-ed piece before he left office, he said, we need a Surgeon General's warning on social media. Just like the box of cigarettes has a warning label that says that it could cause cancer, just like we have signs posted up that says if you are a person who is pregnant, you should not be consuming alcohol. He's saying we need warning labels like that because social media has not been proven safe for young people. This was a strong statement to make. Now, that did not happen while he was in office. However, I do have good news about two states that are working on their own legislation around that at the end. So just continuing with this last little slide here I've got about the intersection before we get to solutions. We also understand not just being on social media creates increased mental health challenges, but the longer we spend on it. So if I open my app and I look at it for 5 minutes, maybe, okay, sure, no, fine, no harm, no foul. But if I'm on it for 30 minutes, for 60 minutes, for 90 minutes, the longer that time goes, the more likely I am to experience negative mental health symptoms like anxiety, isolation, hopelessness. We are impacted by interactions, even if we act like we are not, and it's a human condition to want to be liked, to want to be included in the pack. And so when we post something and we get negative feedback, negative comments, we don't get as many views as we wanted, it can have an impact on how we feel about the content we created, the value that we bring to the world and to the space that we try to fill. And while I don't have time to get fully into this, there is some brain research going on how filters and angles are actually affecting the teenage brain's perception of reality. Now, hear me, I'm not saying that the Snapchat, dog ears and tongue is real. They don't think that's real. It's more that like the beautification filters and the angles that pictures are being taken from, like that's creating a warped perception of reality and what is true. And so that's creating some confusion there. So anyway, just something to keep tabs on and note in terms of the research, because I do think that's really fascinating. All right. So it's solution time. We've got to figure this out. And I probably will zoom through some of this real quick just to make sure that we have time to cover all of the suggestions and then also leave time for some questions. But all of my solutions came from a couple different things. Like I told you, I come from the world of primary substance use prevention. So we've got models and science that we based our work on. That second resource there, I've also got to share with you at the very end. The Biden-Harris administration put together a task force to address online safety for young people. That document is more like 127 pages, I think, but a lot of the solutions that I'm sharing came from that as recommendations. So another great thing for you to dive into for further information. The third thing is what I've already mentioned, and then other resources there. Okay, so this is the strategic prevention framework. It's what we base our prevention work on across the United States, really across the world. I would love to spend hours explaining all of the steps of this to you, but I won't do that to you. I'll just tell you that really where we start is an assessment. And you all already have a rich head start on that because your student survey, your YRBS survey, already has information about how much time your young people are spending online. And so I would be curious to get into that data a little bit deeper and start cross-tabulating like what's the overlap. Just like I did with the other surveys of those seriously considering suicide, I would like to look at like how much time they're spending online, what kind of bullying they're receiving. I would just have a little heyday with all your data. So we start with those questions like who's on it, who's most impacted, what apps are they using, how long are they spending on it, who's experiencing really long-term negative consequences. So these are just a couple assessment questions you would start with, and that would start to guide your discussion and your process of figuring out what's contributing to these problems. What are the risk or the protective factors at play? And these are a few that I drew from our prevention world of substance use prevention. These are a couple that I think are very much involved in the overlap here with our intersection. So things like if someone is just more rebellious in nature, they're more likely inherently to like test rules and break rules. That will put them at higher risk of having poor outcomes of this intersection. If there are family management problems or conflict in the family, this could look like, oh, I don't want to be around my family. My parents are fighting, or my sibling is creating issues. So withdrawal to the phone, withdrawal to the bedroom. If there's no clear expectations, there's inconsistent punishment or rules, all of that can create increased risk. One of the basics of substance use prevention is trying to reduce access to substances for young people. But young people are walking around with these devices in their hands. And so that access is right there. So that's something to think about addressing. Certainly our norms as society, like we are all carrying these around all the time. You go to any restaurant, you're likely to see everybody at that table that has their phone next to them. Even if they're not engaging with it, it's probably out. Crossing this line into things that protect our young people. if as an individual, I just am more resilient. If I can face tough things, work through them, yeah, it's gonna be hard, it's gonna be terrible, I'm not gonna like it, but I come out the other side, that's resiliency. So they've got a long, strong sense of resiliency. If they're higher self-esteem, if they've got bonding happening with a trusted adult, whether that's you as a parent and guardian, whether that's you as a youth pastor or a neighbor or a teacher or a counselor, whatever that looks like, bonding with individuals in their community, that serves as a protective factor. So that's a way all of us, with every young person in our life, we can make a difference by just being that trusted adult. Offering young people positive opportunities for belonging, ways that we could recognize good positive behavior. All of these build what I call bubble wrap around our young people that help to mitigate the impact of the risk factors that maybe they can't control. So these are just a few of the things that could be contributing to the problems we're seeing at this intersection. Again, a lot more to be said about this, but I want to bring you some solutions to end our time together. So first of all, I already mentioned this, be a trusted adult. To be able to talk to them about their online experience and especially without repercussions. If you have an adolescent, like a teenager, like somewhere in like the high school range or older middle school, this is one of the suggestions that I'll have in a second is to bring them into the conversation about rules and make it something that's a conversation, not necessarily these like repercussions, because we want to create space for them to be able to talk to us. Use current news stories as a starting point. Maybe we see something on national news about a celebrity, or we see something that comes across, or even use this presentation. Hey, this lady talked to us about some stuff. What do you feel like your online space has been like? Do you feel like you see stuff about substance use? How does that make you feel? Asking questions based on things that are out there. I also encourage us as adults, but youth especially, to set limits for ourselves. Things like no phone use after 10 p.m. Okay, especially for those like 52% of your high schoolers who were using it from midnight to 5. Man, just dial down. Turn off the phone at 10 p.m. Set app use limits. I'm actually currently limiting myself to 15 minutes a day on Instagram. And at the first couple of days, that was actually really hard. I was hitting my limit. Last couple of days, I've not hit my limit at all. It's just about retraining the brain. The first couple of days, I was opening that app senselessly. Like it was just a subconscious thing to click on that app. I moved it to a different folder, and so I'm not doing that anymore. And I've not been driven to it. We can rewire our brain. Our brains are neuroplasticity. We just have to have that awareness. And so, me setting that limit so it pops up and tells me when I'm at 15 minutes. Not that everyone has to do 15. That's actually pretty harsh for myself. But that kind of thing can really help us to be aware of how long we're spending, because we spend more than we realize without knowing that we've been on that long. A few other things, asking questions about what's trending, asking how being online affects their mental and their emotional health. Certainly prioritize and set the expectation and model having healthy boundaries with our devices. Make sure you're not on it all the time. Teaching them refusal skills, how to kind of recognize when they don't feel right about something they're seeing. Maybe if they're starting to feel an emotion rising up, how to work through that. There's a lot of words on this slide. These are all in that document I'm going to share with you as a resource. I just wanted to show you that the document has some really great conversation starters. So if you do have a young person in your life, things like, hey, I know that social media is important to you. I wanted to check in about it. How do you think things are going with your social media account? Even the last one on the slide, I love it because I actually had a friend who used this with her son. He would come out of his room from playing Fortnite and was just like angry at the dinner table and rude to his sister. So she was like, hey, let's talk about gaming. I've noticed a couple of behaviors. I want to hear from you too, how you feel. Let's get on the same page about this. And he ended up saying, like, yeah, I really don't feel great. I'm frustrated with my friends because they either like, let me down, or they abandoned me, or they didn't revive me, or whatever. And he was able to recognize that he doesn't actually really like how he feels when he comes off of that game. So they were able to have some conversation there. A common question that I get is, when is the appropriate time for a young person to get a phone? Y'all, research says there really isn't a right time, because there's so many different scenarios. And so as I put on this slide for you all, lots of research around this, recent, fresh research. Really, the key is it depends on maturity level. And this isn't really social media. Remember, social media is not not meant to be until 13 at least, but also, it's going to depend on the child themselves. It could be cell phone use just to make sure that they've got a way to contact you if they get home from school before you, all of that. But as it says here, is your child responsible about things like homework? Do they say sorry if they hurt a friend's feelings? How well do they follow other tech rules? Like if you tell them, hey, it's time to come on to turn the TV off, are they fighting with you in that moment? Or is it like, okay, and they shut off the TV? And are you ready to support them in this? Because giving phones means more burden on you. You need to be checking things like the Spotify chat. You need to be checking and having all of those parent permissions set so that you're getting that. My sister has her son's phone set to where he can't even add a new phone number as a contact in his iPhone unless she adds it. She has to put in her own code and she can add that phone number. So he has to come to her. It's so cute. I saw it happen. He's 12 and he has a phone. And he had to come to her because he wanted to add a girl's phone number in it. And she was like, "Who is this girl?" "Oh, the so and so's friend." And, da, da, da. And I was sitting there during this, just kind of smiling, watching it happen. And she was like, "You don't even know this girl?" And he's like, "Well, no, but so and so does." And she was like, "We're not adding a girl who we don't know to our phones, right?" So just like that, because he is one to push the boundaries. He's one to kind of stretch truth to push boundaries. And so she knows that about her son. So she's helping him to make these decisions. But also, she's got those rules set. Anyway, let's get through this. So, these kinds of things, like you see here, the percentages of when teens think they should, when parents think they should. While I can't give you a solid answer, these are just things for you to think about. And then, of course, the American Academy of Pediatrics has some thoughts on this. That's where my source was for all of that. So definitely look into this. Definitely figure out what would be best for your young people. And actually, hang on, let me see if I can grab this really quick. I'll drop it in the chat. There is a quiz that AT&T and T and the American Academy of Pediatrics collaborated on for parents to take to see if their child is ready for a phone. So that may be helpful to you moving forward if you're in a position where you are thinking about that. Couple strategies for parents and caregivers: build a family media plan, which is a tool that I'll share with you in the resources. Talk about it, set a good example. Some of these things I've already mentioned, making it a low drama part of the family conversation. Like, do not make this an emotionally heightened thing. If it does get heated or a little bit elevated, maybe just push pause, because I can't stress this enough. You want to be on the same page about social media with your child because you want them to come to you when they see something that alarms them. You want them to come to you with that. So make yourself a safe person in that way to be able to have healthy conversations with them. These are some general recommendations from the industry: banning ads for those under the age of 16, not just, I mean, ads in general. They're talking about banning them. Certainly figuring out ways to verify age for those under 13 not being on the platform. There is also some push to raise the minimum age from 13 to 16 to have a social media account. Hasn't happened yet, but there's been some proposal there. Certainly formation around AI. I didn't have time to get into AI tonight, but that's a whole nother branch of conversation to have here. My main push for you tonight is to think about this last point on here. These are here for you to come back and review for sure, and these are in the content and resources I'll share, but we need to start requiring media literacy in schools. Just like they have to learn about the Civil War, just like they have to learn basic math, we need to teach media literacy so that our young people can learn how to be safe online, both from predators, but also from the impact of the things that I've talked about. And there's lots of great media literacy curriculum out there. I've got a few in the resources of my slides to show you. A lot emerging around that. And this is just neat. Just so you all know, Missouri's Senator Josh Hawley successfully passed the KOSA, this Kids Online Safety Act, August of 2024, which held social media accounts liable to regulating the content deemed harmful to minors. There's actually about 1,600 lawsuits right now active against social media accounts for this very thing in the last like 2 weeks. There's been a lot of media around some lawsuit going on about how dangerous this was for a young person online. The person that started it said they really experienced poor mental health because of the lawsuits going on. So certainly keep tabs on things like that. And then I teased this earlier. One of your neighbors up there, Minnesota, actually did pass a law and barring any sort of other legislative changes, as of July of this year, users of social media will have to click a verification acknowledging that social media has been known to be hazardous to their mental health. I love the idea. My concern is that becomes a little bit of like just white noise. If you have to do it every time you open the app, you're just going to click past it every time without thinking about it, but at least it could bring some awareness, hopefully. And my understanding is that New York is also working on that. So to conclude us, get to questions. Feel free to start dropping any questions you have in the chat so we can make sure that we get to them. My conclusion is the solution is connection and protection. We've got to connect with our young people. Hopefully, this information empowered you and informed you on what is some important pieces of information to have, but also some important guidance and next steps for you to take. These two documents are the two I've referred to. The one on the left is that 127 pages, lots of recommendations in it. The one on the right is Dr. Vivek Murthy's document. And the QR code takes you to an online page that has a lot of resources, the family media plan, curriculum for online spaces, a lot of the things that actually I share here on this second resource slide. Lots of great content there so that you all can refer back to this and get some more information for yourselves. So I'll let the screen share pause here. If anybody needs any kind of contact information for me, it's right there on the screen. And I've got sources of my slides as well. If anyone needs any of the sources that I had, I would be happy to share them with you. But Brian, I am not seeing any questions come in, but we can of course just pause and see if anyone wants to come off of mute and ask questions as well. I know you said you might want to stop the recording